So question number 2, I had to throw this question in there because, if we're going to talk about that, we got to talk about the other too, right? So question number 2 is a little bit of a follow-up that goes on with question number 1, and that is, how do we know that Jesus wasn't an angel? Because if we're going to be talking about the angel of the Lord as a pre-incarnate form of Jesus, then how do we know that Jesus isn't an angel or wasn't an angel and became something else? So, let's see. Let's go and take a look at Hebrews chapter 1. And let's kind of get some definitive grounds here about how Jesus is not an angel. Okay? Yes, Hebrews chapter 1 and in verse number 1. So, in Hebrews chapter 1 and in verse number 1, it says, in the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, and through whom He made the universe. His Son, or the Son, is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of His being. Okay? And so here we see that Jesus, by being is what it says here, the radiance of God's glory. It's almost as if, we can think of it as, a light source, and you can't see the light source, but there is something that is being illuminated from it, okay? And so you can't see, it's just an illustration, but you can't see God's glory because it's too bright, but you can see the exact representation of Jesus. And so, or the exact representation of God's glory with the person of Jesus, okay? And so the only way that you can have an exact representation of God's glory is to have what? God in the flesh. Because if you have God's glory, and God's glory is so great, so awesome, so perfect, anytime that you have a representation of it, but it's not going to be exact, then it's going to be faulty, right? If you're going to have an exact representation of it, that must mean that you're going to have God that is doing the representing of it. There's no way that you're going to have an exact representation of God without the thing that is doing the representing also being God. Does that make sense? Okay. He says, as we continue on down, in verse number, going back to verse number 3, the Son is the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of His being, sustaining all things by His powerful word. And so here we have the act and the power of God in the person of Jesus Christ. And that is that we have Jesus sustaining all things by His powerful word. Now let me ask you a question. Who created all things? God did. Who is it that can sustain and is sustaining all things in the universe? God is. But what we see here is that it is Jesus who is sustaining all things by His powerful word, right? Well, what does that tell you? It tells you Jesus is God. Now, Jesus didn't become God after His resurrection either. If you stop and think about it, it's an impossibility for something to become God. Because God, by His very definition, is going to be the infinite of all things. Something cannot become the infinite of all things. It doesn't work that way, right? Plus, you read in John chapter 1, verse 1, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that word is talking about Jesus Christ. Okay? And so here we have Jesus Christ existing with God in the very beginning, that Jesus Christ is the one who has created all things, that Jesus Christ is sustaining all things, and he is the exact representation. So what does that tell you? It tells you Jesus is God, right? Now what about angels? Well, he goes on to say, verse 5, for to which of the angels did God ever say? So, he's talking about angels, and really the first part of the book of Hebrews is that he's setting Jesus as being superior to angels. The first part of the book of Hebrews is really showing how Jesus is superior to all different things, but here it's superior to angels. Okay, so he says, for which of the angels did God ever say, you are my son, I have become your father? None. Okay? Or again, I will be his father and he will be my son. Was there any angel that got that title? No, not at all. And again, when God brings his firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. Okay? Now stop right there for a second. Are there times in the Bible that somebody tries to worship an angel? What happens when that occurs? The angel immediately stops them, right? Do you remember the book of Revelation when John was being shown different things and he stopped and he started to worship the angel showing him, and the angel said, stop, worship God. Okay? So angels, that is God's angels, not fallen angels, but God's angels recognize that worship is only due to God. Okay? But here we see that all of God's angels are to worship him, right? And what's more, as it says, speaking of angels, he said he makes his angels winds, his servants flames of fire. But about the Son, he says, your throne, O God, will last forever, and righteousness will be the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has set you above your companions by anointing you with the oil of joy. And so here we are, very clearly saying angels are ministers, servants of flames of fire, but the Son is God, right? Because it very clearly says, your throne, O God. As a matter of fact, we go on down verse number 9. It says, therefore God, your God, has set you above your companions. Okay? And so when you look at this, you can see very clearly that Jesus is not an angel. Jesus is above the angels. He's superior to the angels. The reason why he's superior to the angels is because he is God the Son. Okay? All right. You have any questions on that one? Comments on that one?